Hello, Dane. Let's talk about suicide. So, why would someone want to commit suicide, to end their life? Well, it's always for one primary reason. There is a pain that the ego, does not want to feel, that is very likely to be felt. So that's why to end the pain through ending life, right? You can think of, for example, why if someone is burning alive in a building and you cannot get them out, and they're screaming in horrible pain, would you shoot them from the ground to put them out of their misery? Or would you let them burn alive? It's that type of equation, right? There's a kindness, a compassion in ending one's life, right? If one is becoming a vegetable and one finds the idea abhorrent, then why not end one's life? So that's basically the reason to commit suicide. Now, occasionally in gang dynamics and criminal dynamics, someone will agree to die, to be the fall guy, for example, to be put to death, etc., on condition that one's family will be taken care of. So that would be another reason to die. If you live, if you go against us, your family will be harmed, and that would create incredible pain. Who would want to live knowing that one's life had killed what one likes and loves the most? Right? So it's always that equation. If I live, I will be in more pain than if I die, right? So chronic illness, but illness takes, a variety of forms. You have physical disease, physical discomfort. You have emotional disease, emotional pain. You have mental pain. You could say you have spiritual pain, but although it's maybe located around spiritual issues, it's mental. And all psychological pain, they all go together, right? There's an illusion that somehow you can feel psychological pain with no symptoms in your body, and that is an illusion, right? So we're just talking about where the focal point is, right? If you have an idea like my life is pointless, then the source of the pain is in that idea, but you will feel emotional pain, and you will feel physical pain with the emotional pain, right? And if you feel physical pain, you will have the thought, this could go on, and it will be painful emotionally and mentally that you're in a chronic condition of physical pain, right? So psychological pain is, I would say, the worst for a couple of reasons. One is it's not like, a bone that if you set it, it will heal, right? You will still feel like if you break a physical bone or if you heal the physical bone, you will still feel psychological pain. Your body, when you are depressed, feels terrible. Even if you don't have a broken bone, that type of thing. The second reason is that we are a psychologically illiterate culture. And as a result, if you fall down in the road and break a hip or whatever, everyone around you knows what to do. They get out of the car, they call 911, they respond, and so you have an experience of an empathic culture. Now, with psychological pain, the exact opposite happens. Everyone avoids it, says it's none of my business, tells you to be cheerful, get over it, just don't talk about it, and they leave you. And in doing so, shame you for having feelings, and then shame you for not knowing how to deal with the feelings that the culture gave you and didn't teach you how to deal with, right? So it's a setup, right? The cult could say, like you could be surrounded by strangers that said, we're so sorry, we've all participated in creating this probability field where you're in massive amounts of psychological pain, and we haven't taught you how to deal with it. We chose not to do that in kindergarten. We chose not to do that in middle school. We chose not to do it at high school. We chose not to do it at work. And surprise, surprise, you don't know how to solve your psychological pain, right? Dumb us, right? We apologize, and I mean, we don't know what to do either, though. But because we're nobody taught us either, right? But we can at least be in this together, right? We can all acknowledge that we are fools for not doing the scientific research to deal with this and then teach the best practices. And so we're fools together. But shame-based fools are afraid of that they are wrong and bad, right? Because psychologically illiterate cultures produce lots of shame, but they don't teach people how to heal it. So as soon as it becomes clear that there's profound incompetence in the cultural space, there's scapegoating, right? Which is, as dumb as it sounds, right? The original scapegoating was to find a random goat in the tribe, throw rocks at it, blame the goat for the lack of rain and all that, which, as you can imagine, did not improve the life, but it brought hope to a stupid people that didn't have a better option than throwing rocks at a goat, right? Well, we're far more sophisticated than throwing rocks at goats, right? So we just shame and alienate human beings and isolate them, right? When they start saying, what the fuck's going on? I'm in terrible pain. Somebody do something. People don't rush over and say, gosh, we're a bunch of fools. We apologize. We don't know what to do because we're psychologically illiterate, but at least we'll be with you and we can be stupid together, right? Right? The scapegoating more goes like, you're being negative, you're going to, And so now you're in more pain than before because you realize that everyone's scared and uncomfortable because you've pointed out the pink elephant in the room. And there's a real tendency for the inner child to blame itself for the stupidity of everyone else, right? Because that's how children survive the stupidity of their parents. Right? Their parents hit them and blame them for all their problems and transfer intergenerational abuse. And the child says, I'm so sorry, I'm bad. I deserved all this punishment, right? And then the parents let up a little bit, right? But it's, it's just the child agreeing to pretend to solve the problems that none of the grown-ups are willing to solve, right? And it's awfully dumb to say basically in a family system, you, Mom, you don't know how to deal with this and you're in lots of turmoil and upset and reactivity. Okay, great. Dad, you don't know how to deal with it either. Great. Let's give it to the 5-year-old, right? We can't deal with it. Let's give it to the 5-year-old and hit them, right? And tell them not to talk back. And, the 5-year-old says, oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to fix it, right? You can't, right? Cowardly motherfuckers, right? You can't do that, but I'll figure out, what to do with the stuff that grown-ups haven't been able to figure out for generations in a fucked up, psychologically illiterate cult that refuses to do the science around heart and mind and body, right? And keeps pretending that making a lot of money is going to make a difference in those types of things. So profound stupidity breeds profound stupidity, and profound stupidity creates massive amounts of pain, but stupid people cannot solve the pain they cause with their stupidity because that requires being intelligent, right? And stupid people are not intelligent, right? So this is, but and pointing that out, right, to a bunch of stupid people upsets them, right? It should upset them that they've been tolerating their stupidity this long, but that doesn't upset them, right? What upsets them is hearing about it. And so it's absolutely miserable, right? Because the inner child is in there saying, it's all my fault. All these people are hating me, for pointing out their stupidity. They don't have any time to be useful, right? Because they're too busy reacting to all this, right? And and the child believes, if I just died, right, then all these people could be happy again, right? They could all carry on being fucked up fools, and could say, oh, it's so sad, that they killed themselves, but if only we had known. Yes, if only you had known, you goddamn motherfuckers, right? If only any of you took the time, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 seconds, to actually know a goddamn thing about your children, right? And what they're holding on to and why they're holding it on. If any of you actually bothered to know, right? Then, yes, they might not have committed suicide, right? But no. If only we had known without taking the time to know, right? You saw their facial expression when you saw that. But if only I had known, right? If only I'd known, right? So it's a difficult thing, right? It's a difficult thing when you're in massive amounts of pain and the people who gave it to you don't have the intelligence or decency to own up. What do you do? Well, the result of that is you're in more pain than well-being, right? And I can say with certainty that more of my life has been in more pain than well-being than the rest of my life, right? There have been parts of my life, a minority of the time, I'm experiencing more well-being than pain. But a majority of times, I'm experiencing more pain than well-being. Well, and sometimes it's, 5 to 1. 5 units of pain, 1 unit of well-being. It's an excruciating amount. Then adding to that, the brain tends to highlight and exaggerate the negative, and dwell on it, and ruminate on it. Whereas, the positive gets marginalized if there's any kind of small thing, right? So that makes it worse, 5 times worse, right? Because the brain is 5 times more obsessed with negativity than it is with positivity, right? So there's painful stuff going on, a lot of it, and then the brain is amplifying that 5 times, and it's a shitload of pain. And in a psychologically illiterate culture, it is not clear how to heal or solve that pain, particularly when it's not internal in the sense that it's all over my body. Like right now, I feel an ache here. I feel numb. I have hypertension in my thighs and in my calves. I feel tired. My eyes are aching. There's soreness throughout, much of my skin. So it is out there in that sense, but it's not out there in terms of I'm not bleeding, right? Most of the world is very skilled at overlooking the tells of that kind of pain, right? I remember at the peak of it, when, I didn't want to end up on the street, so I was working. Client asked me, "How you doing today?" And I said, "Absolutely terrible. I can barely get out of bed." And their response was, "Great, keep it up." Like I don't even know if they didn't register it or if they were just like, "How dare you tell me the truth? When I'm your client, professionals keep their feelings hidden, just like children, just like grown-ups, just like everyone else, right? Teenagers, right? We're a cult of suppression, denial, and stupidity." That's what you get for bringing it to the surface, right? And most people would just like to be prolific in their denial. Look at that person with his nice hat and this and making all that money and when I was, quote, wildly successful and feeling absolutely miserable inside, people would tell me how successful I was, but not actually ask how I was feeling or be interested. And if I told them that I felt like shit, they were disconcerted and withdrew as opposed to being comforting and useful, right? So in other words, it's a good way to put it is we have a cult or a culture that is intelligent enough to cause massive amounts of intergenerational abuse to men and women, boys and girls, but which isn't smart enough to solve or heal even 20% of the pain and trauma that it causes, right? So we give someone 5 units of pain and trauma, we maybe heal about 20% of that. The brain amplifies the remainder another 5 times, right? And you're in massive amounts of pain relative to well-being, large chunks of the time. Well, when I don't like playing chess, right? Sometimes I'm playing chess and I feel worse and worse and worse, and I get frustrated. And I think I don't have to play chess. I'm just going to delete the game, right? And that's the end of that. I feel better having walked away from the game. And sometimes I go into a restaurant and start trying to place an order, and the waiter is rude to me, and then I look at the menu, and the menu is a crappy menu relative to what I want to eat. The prices are high, the restaurant is playing a loud music that I don't like, and it's very clear that continuing to pay money in this establishment is going to create a net negative, meaning I will feel worse mentally, emotionally, physically, and financially because I walked in to pay these people money. And so what do? I put the menu down, I walk out of the establishment, right? I'm not going to take time, money, and natural resources to feel worse when I don't have to, right? And if I'm in a relationship with someone that says, oh, I'm going to really do this and this and this, and then they don't, and then they don't apologize, so you have to point it out. They say, oh my God, did that really happen? And you have to explain to them what they did. And then you have to explain to them that an apology might be in order. And then they say they're never going to do it again, even as you can tell that they haven't changed. They haven't even grasped the pattern. So they're going to go do that again. They say, please give me another chance, right? You give them another chance and they do it again. And it feels even worse because, you're the fool now. You could see that wasn't going to happen. And they've convinced you to go through the abuse cycle one more time. Well, you leave that relationship. When you go to a hospital to get cured, right? and they don't wash their hands, and they show up with rusty tools, and it's very clear that they're going to make you feel worse than you did when you arrived, which is not uncommon in hospitals. Complications, i.e. hospital dysfunction, is the third leading cause of death in a number of Western countries, right? The third leading cause is the dysfunction of the medical system, right? So, okay, so I'm not going to pay money to be damaged. So that logic, right? If life is more painful by a factor of 3 than it is healing, enjoyable, and pleasurable, why stay in the relationship? Why stay in the body relating to a planet in a cultural context that has the capacity to cause massive amounts of pain, but not the intelligence to heal it? Why stay in the relationship? Right? What's the difference between choosing to live, right? And if you'd shoot a rabbit, right? You ever run over a rabbit and watched it spasming and in trauma and thought about putting it out of its misery, right? You know, whacking it against a tree so that it can die instantly? Have you ever, you know, when any animal is profoundly damaged, right? And when your pain is excruciating, right, and you can't function and enjoy life, why not put someone or something out of its misery if it cannot be resolved? Right? If it cannot be resolved, and that is the challenge, right? So my first, which you probably remember, as you're probably, well, I guess you could be any point being my younger self, but the first big equation around suicide was during our parents' divorce. Right? So there's screaming and trauma outside the bedroom. We already have PTSD, right? So that just gets activated and activated, right? Idiots can cause trauma, but they can't heal it, nor can they empathize with it. Sociopaths, narcissists cannot empathize with trauma, right? So they're escalating it. And what can we do, right? We're not even legal, right? We're in a strange country. We're in massive amounts of pain, and the bastards just keep making it worse, right? Why not end it all, right? And so that was the first period. And what I ended up doing at that point, right, because obviously I'm still alive, and so there are different reasons why I'm alive, and that's what I'm kind of going to go into. So what I did at that point was I created an alternate reality. We were in Canada at the time. You know, the parents had let the passports expire and all that, but you know, it's not a bad country, and I felt trapped in the bedroom, and I felt trapped and humiliated and traumatized when I left the bedroom. So I did a couple of things. So first, headphones to block out a lot of it, putting locks on the bedroom door to stop, you know, incessant violation by all members of the family, and then structuring a routine, setting goals, so creating a little microclimate, putting a stone face and refusing to engage with the family system to minimize contagion and reactivity between family members. But then developing a fantasy world of, like, what could I do, right? I'm a miner. I'm depressed. I'm highly sensitive. But you know, we were in Vancouver, North Vancouver at the time, and so you know, I read some books on survival. Right, there's ferns, you know, rich forests, native animals. Now, we were raised vegetarian, but you know, there wasn't any huge issue about that. You know, but you know, I had a bow and arrow. You know, could I hunt? Could I create an encampment, you know, on the mountain that would be sustainable and would be better than living at home? And looking into it in detail, like a plan B. And, you know, it was frustrating to realize that whether it was the police or well-wishers or the public or vandals or criminals, that there was no faction of the public that would say, wow, you need to get out of this house or kill yourself. We're going to leave you alone and let you survive, right? Because I didn't want to steal. I didn't want to, you know, get involved with crime. But, you know, I figured if I learned enough survival skills, I could easily, you know, hunt deer, etc., and, you know, stay alive in the Canadian wilderness as a miner until I came up with something else, right? So I looked at all that and read and kind of made it real. And just having another option, you know, I realized that it was not in any way a sure thing. And the most depressing thing about it was the sheer stupidity of a population, right, that would take a suicidal kid back to the family that turned them into that state as somehow protecting the child. It is a bizarre insanity, frankly, right? But you know, if you go far enough in the wilderness, you can probably, you know, work it out. But I didn't like the uncertainty of the kind of the fugitive lifestyle or the lack of income in any way to, you know, be able to write my journal and stuff. So I kind of did a calculated pro and con of that. And I realized that having a laundry machine, having the ability to earn money doing babysitting, having the ability to have electricity and not be hunted down, you know, by well-wishers was better, right? But just knowing that that was the equation right now, and I could, you know, go off in the wilderness at some point, reduce the pressure, it reduced the sense of helplessness. You know, I could face the family, the parents, the abusers, you know, and just say, well, you know, you guys behave too dumb and I'll be off in the wilderness. As opposed to you guys can just be as dumb as you can possibly be and there's nothing I can do about it. I think helplessness has a lot to do with suicide. And so by having a very clear plan B, you know, that was an empowering position. Now, at that point, I had a lot to look forward to. Like once I become 18, once I do this, et cetera, and then plus the society has a promise, you know, get educated, work hard, be smart, make lots of money, get married, and you'll live happily ever after, right? So that's the idea, right? Everyone's trying to help you and say, you got to finish your education, supposedly because it's going to lead to this happy life. And at that point, you don't really know, right? And so maybe it would, right? And so kind of a pity to, you know, end life for that reason. Now, I left home at age 17. that helped a lot. Began making progress, achieving goals, making money, and certainly that helped a lot. Now, the next big wave of suicide hit after I achieved all those things. So I had done lots of therapy, had lots of crystals. Crystals were supposed to be these healing metaphysical tools. Had done lots of channeled workshops, done lots of meditations, achieved thousands of goals, built my own house, built 2 houses, designed it just so, had 30 lover relationships and knew all about the joys of ecstatic sex, was eating the finest food on the planet, all organic, had a lovely house, was debt-free, had some savings. So all the things, was eating this, had a good job, this. And it didn't do anything for the traumatic pain. In fact, what it did was it calmed the outer reality so that these inner voices of screaming infancy just rose up, and I realized the whole thing is a lie. It's not going to heal or do anything for this inner trauma. At the time, I didn't even know what the word meant, I should point out, but this isn't working, right? I feel worse in my peaceful outer world because the inner screams are louder in this peaceful reality. When I'm rushing around trying to survive, I can distract myself. But all success means is that I've got a lot of time on my hands to realize I don't know what the fuck I'm doing in a cult that doesn't know what the fuck it's doing. And no amount of money, it's not going to work. I'm in pain, right? So that was the second big crisis. And again, I'm in way more pain than well-being, and outer luxury is not going to cut it. What the hell is, right? So at this point, I got more deeply involved in the suicide, meaning what's a good way to commit suicide, right? There's a good book, I think, called The 5 Last Acts, something like that. So I got the book and kind of looked at how to have a good suicide, basically. And I got the equipment to have a good suicide, right? So I was saying, okay, that's there. Like now there's a pressure release because that's, an open mind. Now, I also had an inner dialogue, and I encourage this as a dialogue. So, it began, I asked the part of me that wanted to die to list all the reasons that they wanted to die. Now, the biggest reason, of course, is I'm in way more pain than I am in well-being. I've tried everything that I know, and I'm in even more pain than well-being because I've got lots of space to be present to it, but it's not going away. It's getting louder. So, right? So that's, the big reason. But, what's causing all this pain, right? Well, when I say that I'm needy, women reject me and are disgusted rather than saying, how can we help meet your need, right? That would be a human response, right? If I'm more, like women complain about, a lot of it was relational, but, women complain about if certain things don't get discussed and the relationship blows up, they say, oh, I wish I had known, right? So I said, okay, you say you wish you had known. Okay, so the next woman comes along. Before we get into a relationship, all these other women say they wish they had known these things. So do you want to actually take time to know these things? No, they didn't, right? They wish they had known, but they didn't want to know, right? So I'm going to be blamed because they didn't know, and I'm going to be rejected because they don't want to know, right? Well, there's a dumb, protocol of relationship. It just happens to describe 90% of the women that I was engaging with. That's depressing, right? And then there's all this pain of traumatic reenactment. It's not just little things based on the moment. There's all these triggers, attachment issues, and nobody gets it. Nobody asks. I've never met a single woman in my life that says, I find you attractive. Let's talk about our attachment templates, right? If that's going to have such a big impact, don't you want to know? No, I don't want to know that, right? Well, let's bring it up. No, I don't want to talk about it. Really? Interesting. So there's no way to have an intelligent, conscious relationship based on knowledge rather than projection and attraction. No, there isn't. Right? Traveled the world, right? Dumb fuck women all over the fucking world do not want to know what they don't know, right? Do not want to make time to learn it, and want to blame and complain when their ignorance blows up in their face, right? So that's pretty dumb, right? And it's, right? There's no place where it's like, oh, of course, let's ask these 100 questions before going into bed and discuss them and have a great plan. No, 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 right? We're going to fuck it up one way or another and blame you, right? Absolute horror, right? Absolute traumatic reenactment, right? And if you don't do that, right? If you insist on talking about things, we're not going to fuck you, right? You're going to be rejected or you're going to be blamed, but no alternative, right? So that's just hitting a wall, right? Trigger, 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 trigger. Fuck that, right? But now I'm back alone with these feelings, not knowing how to deal with them in a cult that knows how to instill them, the feelings, but doesn't teach people how to deal with them. With one incompetent therapist after another, right? You watch therapists' faces. They get uncomfortable if you talk like this to them. Many therapists do not know what to do with this territory as well. Mine didn't. So now I'm comforting the therapists I'm paying to help me, which are not actually helping me, right? And then they're happy, but I'm not, because if I have to pay and comfort the therapist, obviously they're not going to be much help to me, right? And that's enraging, but the therapist wants to be comforted. They don't want to hear about what a shitty therapist they are, right? They're not very good at that, right? You start pointing out the shitty incompetence of 90% of the therapists out there, and they get all worked up about it. And you have to pay them, right, to patiently, and they can easily attack you with the vulnerability you've shared. Otherwise, what's the point in going in therapy? So, fucked up again. All the time, more pain than well-being, more pain than well-being, but roadblock after roadblock after roadblock after roadblock, right? Well, this creates rage, right? You want relief, it's not happening, you're being hit and hit and hit and hit, right? But then the cult is, again, smart enough to cause rage in its people, but too fucking dumb to do anything about it, right? So let's enrage our people, and then let's criticize them for being enraged. You're becoming an angry person. You fucking bet you I am, right? You want to do anything about that? Stop being so fucking enraging? No. We just want to criticize you for becoming angry about all the shitty things we're doing. Well, that isn't actually going to help all that much, you know? I just feel hostility as well as rage, right? That is so dumb. Right? It's so pathetic, right? And it's so painful, right? And now I feel hostile and rage, right? You happy with your great plan, right, of psychological illiteracy? No, we're not happy about it. But let's now reject That's deny, suppress, right? So I become then denied and suppressed. So now I'm in this dynamic, right? People say, how are you doing? I believe in telling the truth. I feel hostile. I feel angry. Okay, I'm going to avoid you, right? Again, intelligent enough to cause the feelings, too dumb to resolve them. But where do I become intelligent enough to resolve them in a fucked up cult that's modeling stupidity, right? How do I become smarter than my role models, right? Nobody points that out. And of course, I didn't become smarter than my role models. I just became smart enough to understand that I was dumb in a cult of dumb people that had taught me to be dumb, right? So I knew that, but I'm dumb enough, I'm smart enough to know that I'm dumb, but not smart enough to figure out the solution, particularly when relationships require two people to say yes and just one to say no. And what I found was an extraordinary correlation that if I mapped out a protocol of relating that had maybe a 90% chance of being highly successful, 99% of people would reject me, not because they didn't like me, they did. They didn't like the protocol that worked. It was unfamiliar, not of their family. So they rejected me because I asked to do it in an intelligent way. On the other hand, if I did it their way, there was a 80-90% chance there would be lots of problems that they were surprised by. I'm not sure why after so many disastrous interactions with people, but they were, right? And so it's lose-lose, right? Either the pain of rejection, which hurt a lot every single time, or the enraging frustration, right, of heading towards a collision, and then the other person is surprised. It is absolute madness, right? And it takes two people to change a relationship dynamic, right? If both people don't want to do it, one of them can walk away. And people walked away and walked away and walked away and walked away, right? A miserable statistic, right? So how to deal with it, right? So I decided to, look closely at suicide. But I also, thought, I could go out with a bang, right? Have a massive party, travel the world. If I'm going to die, I might as well go out in style. I also thought, I've never been drunk, never tried a psychedelic. Once you're dead, you're kind of dead, right? You don't just get to say, get on the other side and see a great insight, right? So you might come back. You might get on the other side and say, why didn't I do this, right? I've just thought of it, right? So I wanted to exhaust those types of things. So I decided to read a couple of books on psychedelics. I learned about trauma and PTSD from a stranger in a cafe, not from any of my therapists. But you're supposed to have a guide, a therapist, whatever. So I did a couple of psychedelics with an incredibly incompetent therapist, Peter Sandhill, and there was another one just before that, who managed, under the influence of psychedelics, to get scared at everything that I was seeing, attack my voice, try and divert it to his delusions, and basically reenacted all of the childhood abuse, including sexual abuse, under the influence of psychedelics. And then told me it was all my fault and gave me a $3,000 bill, right? And at that point, I just lost it, right? And so I went from, trying to be nice and appeasing and stuff to, just, enraged at the whole fucking system, right? Because then another therapist who had trained Peter Sandhill tried to get me to hire her to fix her students' stupidity, right? And then the organization, the Human Awareness Institute, right, didn't want to admit that they had recommended Peter and were all worried in the politics. It was just so pathetic, right? It's such a sociopathic, reptilian play out of this noble, win-win organization. It's just sickening, absolutely. And I'm in massive amounts of pain and trying to integrate this stuff. But I figured out that the psychedelics had actually been very useful. It was the stupidity of my therapists that were causing most of the pain and re-traumatization. So I thought, okay, at least I figured that out from this process. Then I traveled the world trying to heal from the second round of PTSD and found it very hard to do and wasted like $70,000 with all kinds of little annoying interruptions, and nobody knew what I was dealing with and nobody was interested in assisting me. And so I began to dream of creating a place that would be ideal for people to understand and heal from trauma and PTSD for much less money at 10 times the effectiveness. And this was exaggerated by like Bessel van der Kolk's group, had the best literature, but trying to talk with the staff was a joke, right? Like one of them was more interested in a controversy in the newspaper at the time than in understanding what was going on with me. And they said, I can't talk to you right now. I've got to fight this newspaper battle. And it's like, you're the trauma specialist focusing on publicity rather than helping people in trauma, right? But it's just more dumb shit by more psychologically illiterate people, right? Image before substance. It's the American way. So, all of this really hurt, but that crystallized into an ideal, a vision, like fighting for that. So, I would say that the protocol that I've always used and that I recommend for dealing with suicide is, first of all, to ask who wants to die. There's always multiple voices in there. I want to die. Oh, well, perfectly reasonable. Can you explain and tell me why you'd like to die? Well, I'm tired of paying therapists to take care of their feelings and they don't help me. And then they tell me that they help other patients as if it's my fault. Good reason, right? Yeah, I get it, right? I'm tired of all this bullshit people, pretending that I'm successful when I'm absolutely miserable with nobody actually being interested in how I feel. Absolutely, I get it, right? Yeah, carry on, tell me more, right? I'm tired of being hired by clients to do the same boring shit, right? And every time you create a really creative idea, that might not fit in the neighborhood, right? Just is boring, right? One fucking boring person after another, right? No one can step outside the bounds, right? I get it, right? I get it. 20 years of boring fucking clients, right? All wanting the same thing, to fit in without any originality. So fucking boring. Yes. What's that? What else? Well, women blaming me for this always, right? And never apologizing for that. Yes. No one's interested in this. No one's interested in that. No one wants to do this. Nobody wants to do that. You want to spend quality, spontaneous time. Everyone wants to schedule spontaneous time in 2 weeks. Yeah, very irritating. It's not spontaneous at all. Absolutely right. Right? Spend all your time you don't care about making money, right? It's easy to make money, but who gives a shit, right? Where's the deep connecting, right? You go to a workshop and then it's over with, right? Where's the continuity, right? Where's the place where you live that as opposed to just do the workshop? They just want the money of the weekend, right? And then they go back to the same old shit, right? I want to live that. Where do I live that? Nowhere, apparently. Can we do a month-long workshop? No, we can't. Why not? Right? I'll sign up. No. So making a list, right? This is physically discomfort. Oh, it's exhausting. I have chronic fatigue. My muscles won't relax. Massage doesn't help. This doesn't do that, right? So, okay. You want to die, and you have a long list of reasons based on the fact that you're in far more pain. You're invisible, you're shamed, you're traumatized, you're lonely, you're failing, and you're being fought and misunderstood when you try and do something about it because it's not normal. Who the fucking cares if it's normal, right? Well, all these cult members care, right? They want to do the norm. However boring, however mediocre. I get it. So I'm with you. So everyone in there, you hear this? All these parts of me want to die? I get it. I get it. Is there any part that wants to live? Right? So it turns out, so far, there have been parts that want to live. So I say, okay, why do you want to live? You want to do this, this, and this, and this, right? Is that good enough for you? Do you want to live for those reasons, right? No, not really, Well, you're going to have to come up with some reason that these parts want to live, right? Well, what if we did a really exciting crystal sculpture rather than all this boring work, right? Just for us. Okay, I might give you another year of life for that, right? Or if we did an interesting group with this and this and that. Okay. We'll give you a year, right, to see what you can do to be worth living for. So that's kind of the dialogue, right? Okay, you got a year for that, right? Now you've got beautiful crystal sculptures and you still got unresolved childhood trauma and PTSD. And you did these groups, but it's boring, when you have to expend more energy to host a group than the group gives back to you. Right? Because in a psychologically chauvinistic culture, people are cheap with anything inside. So you give them a deep inner experience and they'll say, this is the most profound inner experience I've had in the world. So will you volunteer 4 hours of your time? No. Will you pay $200? No, it's worth $30 to me, right? The most important experiences are worth $30, but I've got to get my nails done and poison my nose for $70, right? It's just kind of disgusting to be in a psychologically illiterate, chauvinistic culture where even the women prefer appearance more than the substance of felt experience. It's a joke, right? So, but okay, so then back to the dialogue. Who's got an idea they want to live for, right? And is that up? How, what would you have to hear to give another year of life? Because you can always end it in another year, right? So the last round has been, forming a nonprofit, creating an eco-village that doubles as a trauma healing haven. And it is, absolutely shitty to set out on this ambition, on this ideal, and have the realtor kind of moan and groan and try and manipulate to get their commission, and the neighbors try and manipulate to get more work out of the nonprofit and do this and that, and people not keep, the government say, you can't do it here, you can't do it there, you can't do it there. It's absolutely shitty, right? To try and do something transcendent and empathic in a largely bureaucratic and sociopathic environment, right? Where the people that would benefit the most are often too dumb to realize they'd benefit at all. It's maddening, right? I get it. But it is a big dream. It is a big project. And so while I remain in 80% pain and 20% well-being, I think it is a good direction. Meaning, I think that it is a meaningful life to spend it setting up environments and doing the science to create less hell that I've lived for other people. I also think that that is healing for me, right? There's no amount of money that's worth this amount of crap, right? There's no amount of luxury that's worth this amount of pain. It's on a completely different dimension, right? But if you can create real healing, a response to this pain, well, that's a life worth being in pain for, to learn how to not be in pain. And rather than just criticizing, a dumb fuck cult that dumps shit on 5-year-olds generation after fucking generation as if there's some big surprise, to actually do something about it rather than just rage about it. To do something, right, is worthwhile, right? So I'm fighting the idiots, right, that, just want to eke every little penny out of a nonprofit venture, right? Because it's worth fighting for. I'm not interested in fighting over pennies, or millions. Money is not going to solve this, right? But money can create the environment, right? And so, it's a little bit of a paradox, doing jobs you hate, harming the environment in various ways to make more money is not going to do it, right? But it is satisfying to create money, donate it to a nonprofit, invest that money so that it turns into more money in companies that are more good than rotten, and then spend that money on a vision that is what I have wanted my entire life and have not been able to find for any price, to be able to create that, knowing that people may be too dumb to support me in doing it, right? Because, I don't know, they lack the imagination or whatever it is, who knows? But I've always been a great designer. Right. People love the finished outcome when they experience it, right? And so, I've got 50 acres of property in Costa Rica that is morphing towards the healing place that I could not find anywhere in the world. And that's worth hanging in another few shitty years for, and then we can evaluate. Like, that may blow up in smoke, with a 95% failure rate of all community environments, right? But it might succeed, right? And it's worth the pain to do something good. So Viktor Frankl, I think, said it best, that you can survive any what if you have a powerful enough why. So that's really been my answer in recent years is, in massive amounts of pain, what could be so meaningful to be worth enduring that for a period of years, chronic misery. What why could be beautiful enough, true enough, powerful enough to be worth that? And Medicina, a Costa Rican community, is that for now. So if you wonder about life, no, I don't think the American lifestyle is worth living for in its unedited form. But it is a challenge, I think, to each individual, with some parts of us that have a hope of living in a more beautiful and true world. It is a challenge to find a why that's worth this amount of shit, right? Because if you are alive today in this cult, you have been handed a massive amount of pain, right? And you can numb it with food, and you can numb it with drugs, and you can numb it with sex. You can binge watch whatever you want. You can compulsively exercise. But if you can use that pain as a teacher to invest in a cult, in a culture, in a new protocol, a new way of being that's 10 times better than this cult, right? Well, I think that's worth the effort. Take care.